Welcome, my name is Dan Summerby. I'm with Advocatecitizen.com, where we bring important issues to the forefront. Most Americans think that slavery ended under President Abraham Lincoln with the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. However, nothing could be further from the truth. It's not only an international problem, it's a problem here in the United States, particularly here in Houston, with Houston's proximity to the Mexican border. We're going to discuss human trafficking and slavery with our three expert guests. We have Dr. Robert Sanborn, President and CEO of Children at Risk; Maria Trujillo, I hope I said that right, Executive Director of Houston Rescue and Restore; and to bring a law enforcement perspective, Sheriff Adrian Garcia from Harris County Sheriff's Department. Welcome, and thank each of you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to define it. There's a lot of misconceptions, bad media. Maria, what is human trafficking and slavery?
Well, thank you for that question. I always think that's the best place to start. And what I usually say is human trafficking is plain and simple modern day slavery. It's the buying and selling of human life for the purpose and profit and benefit of another person. It's really the commodification of human beings. Like the buying and selling of any other goods, that's what happens in human trafficking. Someone is commodified and sold just like any other good, like bread, water, milk, things like that.
And Dr. Sanborn, is it just the sex, or is it in labor markets too, or how widespread is this issue?
I think it's quite widespread. That's a big thing. Maria, with Children at Risk, we focus a lot on children. When it comes to children and trafficking, primarily what we see is a lot of sex trafficking. And I think that's what's garnered a lot of tension in the United States, is the idea that we have children, we have young people. Anyone that's sort of enslaved or trafficked for sex purposes is really sordid, and so people want to hear about it. But yeah, you can't disregard that there's a lot of people that are brought to this country or that are from this country that are involved in labor trafficking as well.
Right, and the average age, I read somewhere that the average age involved in the sex trafficking is I mean, they're little girls, little boys, 12, 13, is that correct?
Yeah, I think when we see kids coming from other countries, primarily we see a lot of children, a lot of women from other countries that are involved in sex trafficking, but yes, 12 and 13. And then when we see domestic trafficking, and these are a lot of times girls or boys that have run away from home, about the fourth time that they run away from home, they go someplace maybe a little bit farther, they arrive in Houston or in Dallas, and they can be, the average age is 12 and 13, but they could be 9, 10, 16, 17, and very quickly they're found by a trafficker, engaged in a relationship, and before you know it, in a couple weeks, a couple days in many cases, they're on the streets or available via the internet for sex trafficking.
Okay. Sheriff Garcia, let's bring you in. Obviously Harris County is the largest county here in Texas, so you have a huge area-wise. What has the Harris County Sheriff's Department done? Do you have task force such as gangs and stuff like that to deal with the human trafficking issue?
We do it all. We are partnered with the Houston FBI and Houston Police Department and other federal agencies in trying to attack this issue of human trafficking. But also we have been trying to create a vehicle for communication. Obviously our success in contending with this is to get people to tell us circumstances that may be involved human trafficking and or human smuggling, and to let us know what brothels may be out there or what industries may be exploiting people. And so we have leveraged our mobile phone app called I Watch Harris County, which people can send us in texts anonymously. Just all we need is details so that we can go out and investigate circumstances. It's been very effective against drug trafficking. We're trying to push it and strengthen it so that it can be helpful against human trafficking.
And let me ask you this too, Sheriff Garcia. What kind of people are doing this? Is it obviously the average citizen probably would rather call the law enforcement than go deal with these people themselves because there's so much money involved? Would that be, are they just as bad as the drug smugglers?
They're just as bad, if not worse. I mean, when you're dealing with someone who is trafficking in drugs, it's, as Maria said, it's a commodity, it's a product. But when you're talking about human traffickers, you're talking about people who are physically harming another person, intimidating another person, putting the fear of God into individuals. Children, as Dr. Sanborn has said, these are the worst of the worst that we contend with. These are people who not only are working to traffic human beings, but sometimes they end up personally exploiting them in the process as well, sexually assaulting the women, the female children, and even the young boys. And so this is the worst possible human being that you can possibly deal with. And so I always encourage people that if you know someone that's involved in this, call the FBI, call the Sheriff's Office, send us a text through I Watch Harris County, but let us contend with it. We're happy to put them in a jail cell.
Okay. Maria, your group, Houston Rescue and Restore here in Houston, you're primarily educating people on the issue. Where do you do this? Schools, throughout the community? How do you get people to find you?
Sure. We do a lot of general awareness campaigns. One of the big ways that we brought education and community awareness to this issue is having big billboard campaigns where we put out information about human trafficking, that it exists here in our own community, and telling people about the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We also have produced Human Trafficking Awareness Month for the last 8 years in September, and that's a big way where we intensify the community awareness about the issue. And then beyond that, we couple all of that with delivering community presentations to Rotary clubs, neighborhood associations, churches, congregations all over the city. I just had a school group of 7th graders asked me to talk to them yesterday at a Montessori school, so really all over the place. We do lots of community presentations, really getting the word out that way. And then in addition to that, there's people in the community who we deem as frontline professionals, those law enforcement folks, the school counselors and educators, the healthcare professionals, CPS workers and so forth, those people who are on the front lines, who are in the best position to identify a situation of trafficking. We want to make sure that those people really know exactly what it is, how to identify a situation, and what protocols and procedures to take in order to make sure that person gets out of their situation successfully and that prosecution is done against the traffickers and justice is served. So we really focus on these very customized training programs for those professionals and what their professional situation is too.
Is there any statistics, and by the way, any of you, if you want to add to any of these questions, feel free to. Is there any statistics on, as far as law or the prosecution, what percentage are being prosecuted and doing any jail time? Do you have any idea?
I know our local task force.
In Houston particularly?
Yes, our local task force here in Houston started in 2004, and since then I think have prosecuted over 75 cases of human trafficking. The majority of them have gone federally, and about 15 of them gone to the state. So depending on who has the best jurisdiction or who has the best tools, it'll go either state or federal. Of those, I'm not sure how many defendants were actually put in jail, but they've prosecuted those many cases.
But the challenge with that, and and I'm taking ownership of the Sheriff's Office and trying to make that number bigger, because we all know, the three of us here know that
seems a small number. That
is exactly, and that's my point, that it is happening in plain sight. It's happening as we're speaking, and I am frustrated that we can't get more cases to prosecute. And a lot of times you got to realize that the victims of human trafficking are so petrified to seek help because they know the consequences, or at least they believe in the consequences. And so we know that there's more cases, and so the number that Maria quoted is accurate, 75 cases that have been prosecuted, but that's been over a several-year period, which to me is unconscionable for what we believe exists in our community.
And to add to that, those are cases that were prosecuted as human trafficking. Something that prosecutors often do is they'll use the other laws that we have. They'll use visa fraud, alien smuggling, whatever they can do to get the bad guys behind jail. So they may not have enough meat to prosecute under the trafficking statutes, but they'll use any other statutes they can. So again,
so the numbers, it's hard to get an accurate account then because of that.
It is hard, and in a sense, the trafficking is sort of a new crime, right? We're understanding it it's a pretty new thing in terms of its understanding. When you look at laws that have been passed against trafficking, you're really only going back a couple of legislative sessions. The good news, though, Dan, is that when we track people who have been prosecuted at the state level, you see that number increase over the years. But we're trying to pass as many laws possible so that we give law enforcement and prosecutors all the tools necessary to go after traffickers. Now, we're happy if judges find whatever they need and prosecutors find whatever they need to put these people away. And they have. There's a lot of cases that come under prostitution, pandering, so forth. And so that's all good. And so one of the key challenges is to have the right numbers, but we do know the numbers are going in the right direction. We do know we're passing a lot of great laws. Still a lot to do. we're sort of the tip of the iceberg on this. But the sheriff is so right. We have a big county. There are a lot of criminals. There's a lot of trafficking. There's still a lot for us to do, and there's still a lot of awareness to be raised.
And then if you add to that the fact that within law enforcement, there's been a paradigm shift, because typically there's been a lot of, we've touted a lot of success in being able to arrest a prostitute when a community complains.
Sure.
But you got to remember that that person on that street selling herself has been generally exploited and intimidated and forced and coerced into that industry. And here we are arresting the victim. And so we have now instituted training so that we can look at these prostitution cases and understand them from a victim perspective versus a suspect perspective. And so that's relatively new for law enforcement, and we're still trying to get a handle on it.
Okay. I know, Dr. Sanborn, you talk about legislation. How has the state of Texas done compared to some other border states in fighting this?
Yeah, and Dan, one of the things to understand is that trafficking is happening wherever there's a population. So we may talk about trafficking on border states, but the problem's large in New York. The problem's
in
large
Iowa,
in
the middle.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So Texas is unusual, right? We have an unusually porous border, so we have a lot of the international victims, but the largest pool of victims in trafficking is domestic, and so that's all over the place. But when we look at the legislation here, because we've had a group of trafficking organizations, the help of law enforcement, an attorney general who understands this, we have passed more legislation in the state of Texas than almost anyone else. So we're right at the top tier of states that are passing legislation. Early on, we went to the state legislature, this was 3 legislative sessions ago, and we asked the attorney general to do a big task force and look at trafficking. Early on, there was like pushback, well, I don't know if we have time. But that one piece of legislation has led to many other pieces. It's led to law enforcement saying, yes, this is a problem in Texas. We're going to be involved. And then you had leaders like Sheriff Garcia, who early on said, well, I didn't know about this, but wanted to learn. And I think that's the key thing, is that people who become interested
So education
and say we really want to change.
That's what you guys are all about.
We always say there's sort of 4 steps that we need to go through. One is awareness, which we're working really hard on. Hollywood is as well. The second is public policy, changing laws to make all those tools available for law enforcement and prosecutors. Third is helping the victims. We have a lot of victims, not a lot of help going for those victims right now. And fourth, and maybe the most important, is we have to end demand. Right now, it's very easy for a guy to go on to the internet and order up a young girl to visit them. And so we need to do more in that area as well, a lot more.
Well, that probably comes with public awareness. If someone doesn't know the signs to look, and let's talk about Maria and Sheriff Garcia. What are some signs to look for for the community to look for of human trafficking or slavery in the labor force?
Yeah, there's, it's a very nuanced issue and very challenging, but there's lots of different things. One of the things the number one thing is, these are victims who are under the power and control of another individual. So some of the similar things to domestic violence you could look for. So, signs of that power and control, for, brutal beatings, those physical signs of being beaten, cigar marks or cigarette burns on someone's body, those kind, just like malnourishment and those kinds of things, being treated really badly in those ways. So those are some of those physical signs. But then the emotional side, someone who's being, really disconnected from the rest of society, they're living in a different world, an underbelly of our society. So that disconnection, that distrust, they're not going to trust anyone else because they have been told not to, or they're scared to. So that fear, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, these are people who have gone through severe levels of trauma at the same level as torture victims. So think about that. I always say, think about the level of trauma someone has to deal with when they're raped one time. And that's severe. And then imagine that it's life-changing, exactly. Yes. When we talk about sex trafficking, imagine that person being raped 10 times a day, every day, for the last 3 years. That is a trauma that I will never understand, and none of us will be able to ever understand. And so that's how the disconnection and those are the challenges in terms of identifying, because they're so fearful of coming forward. And so really having to build trust with someone and saying, hey, I am here for you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you out of these situations. So those are the kinds of things to look for. There's physical signs, there's those emotional signs. But one of the things is that, you know, victims don't wear a scarlet A on their chest. They look like everyday people.
Right.
And they might have cell phones, they might be walking around in a mall with other women, and they may look like they're free, which is why it's hard for identification. But really, they're afraid of getting away from their trafficker because of the fear, the intimidation, the force that they've been experiencing.
So they're threatening their families.
Their threats. And also, you know, and there's also a love, attention, you know, there's a love element there. Many victims are in love with their traffickers. There's that piece to it as well. So there's lots of challenges that we face in terms of identifying victims.
Okay. And Sheriff Garcia, we're in Houston. I-10 runs right across. I think it's one of the major corridors. I think they say 1 in 4 travels through I-10, whether they're going to California or the East Coast. That makes it hard to patrol on the freeway. It's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible, and you're talking about I-10. You didn't mention 59. You didn't mention 45.
610 loop, Beltway.
You know, it is incredible, and that's what makes Houston a bit so attractive to the industry, because you can hide in plain sight and you can move your products very easily, very quickly across the country, almost instantly. But that's why one of the things that I've done is to institute a highway interdiction unit that we are implementing as we speak. It's been very successful on drugs, and we know at some point we're going to start hitting some soft spots with human traffickers as well. But you know, going back to the issue of identifying the victims, Maria's so right on point. You got to realize that oftentimes when we do come across some of the victims, one of our main challenges is to get them to see what we see. They're
afraid to testify.
They're afraid to testify. They've been programmed to protect the person who has got them in some of the most terrible circumstances. And so the work of social services and psychological services is so critical. And that's also one of the challenges that we have. We don't have enough of those resources to help the victims that we do identify.
Where was that money? Is that state money, federal money? What the money you were?
It's everybody's money.
Yeah. Well, I know with economic times tough, so particularly federal money as well.
It's everybody's money, but it's not enough money. And I think this is one of the key things.
How much money does it need?
Well, I mean,
we can't. Throwing money at something doesn't necessarily always solve it.
No, it doesn't. But even the sheriff's department, the police department, all across the state of Texas, we find that the capacity isn't there to go after very intricate trafficking operations, to go after websites that are doing all sorts of work in this area. I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of money in the area of trafficking, and it's going to take effort for us to go after it. But the other important thing is that victims are not being taken care of. Right now, if we find some of these victims, there's very little that can happen for them. There's not long-term care. As Maria said, they may have been trafficked and raped, you know, over the course of 3 years, but we don't have 3 years worth of resources to take care of them. You know, there's a lot that has to be done, and we have to find a lot of solutions as well. It's not about just money. It's still part of this being an issue that's in its early stages.